Started singing.
Just started singing.
Plus, they're going to baptize.
Okay, so that's why I left. Anyway, so here we are, and I do because we changed antennas, so I didn't want that show to drop out. So I came right back, and so what's going on, kids? How you feeling? We were talking about respect, right? And someone was going how Christianity is getting stronger. Um, well, you have to have. There's no one in that group. Like, so Chris, Mr. Captain Kirk, I met him, right? Like I said, he was a nice guy. He was very sharp. He was quick. He liked to debate. And he had an aggressiveness of purpose. And so all of that was, I liked him, right? And I followed his things. And when people got really upset with him, I didn't. I thought he was at least, kind of following his path. And yes, he had a business plan and he had it all done. And it's almost like in the script, he needed to get whacked because we needed, that movement needed I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back from the dead, you know? So, again, you guys are going to get upset that I'm being uncharitable, but I'm not because I'm just looking at how basically people's prejudices are their beliefs, and their beliefs are their biases, and they're not like Luke. That of all the people who wrote in John's epistles, Luke is my favorite because he didn't know Jesus, and he, had a few people who knew Jesus, but they were like long in the tooth. But he felt it, and because he was a doctor, a scientist, he wanted to give the authority a note of um, credulity, understanding and appreciation, and saying, yeah, this stuff we can't really prove, objectively, but there is a depth of subjective understanding. I mean, miracles actually happen, right? Now, today, what would be considered a miracle, people call medicine. And no, I've been, around medicine. My mom ran hospitals. I was sick, my whole childhood. And then at 10, death was right there and said, okay, I'm taking you, buddy. And then he was like, huh? What? Really? Oh, buddy, you are such a lucky guy. You got someone's got watching out for you and has plans for you, and that was, God and Jesus, and Satan. Satan is made by God made everything, so God made Satan, right? And Satan is what is the worst sin? That if you have this sin, you're going to hell. It's when you not just diss God, because you can be upset and diss God, right? I never do that. I can kind of whine, like, why did that happen? Why should this, because I've seen a lot of misery. I had a lot of friends die of AIDS. I had a lot of friends die of cancer. I had a lot of friends die of gunshot wounds, right? And these are people I cared about who were, you know, they should have stuck around because they were going to change the world, but they didn't because they were dead, right? So they did change me. They gave me an example that I follow. And part of that is, why a lot of people I know who died, especially of gunshot wounds, they always tested authority. They always talked truth to power. And they did it in an egocentric way. Now, that's what you're not supposed to do with God, right? You know, let's see, what are you saying here? Santa, are you wearing a flower print sundress under your sweater? Close, close. Hawaiian shirt. And I'm Bob. I'm Santa's younger brother who takes care of the naughty and nice list, right? So that's, right. So get it. But yes, you got it. You got it close. God is goodness. No, God is unconditional love, not goodness. Good humor is goodness. But God is unconditional love. And we do not manifest faith. It's a presence, a grace that is bestowed on us because we were, you know, our soul is the reflection of God's work in progress. That's what we are, you know? And we are that other, right? There's the other that, is, like I said, the 8.8 billion um, others on this planet is the others. And they are our brothers and sisters from another mother that is the, crosshairs of many different cultures, right? And they basically, because they can't like appreciate each other, they basically are, you know, basically, what do they call that? When you're not fighting the war, but you die anyway, collateral damage. And that's the other. And the other is the person you see on a corner who is asking for help, and you kind of look at them and you get upset and angry and uneased because they have diseased you. Not like they gave you the skank. No, they showed the place inside your heart where you're diseased, where all you can think about is yourself. You know, from and in the beginning to Exodus, um, humanity was just chuckleheads, meaning it was just chaos. Larry begetting Bobby, begetting Sissy, and and there was no order, and then God with, getting everyone across, because there was man's order. There were a lot of empires that, came between, and in the beginning to, Exodus, the Babylonian Empire, the Mesopotamian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Roman Empire, and was also a fledgling thing that kept trying to germinate, and that was the Zionist Empire, right? And people, Zionism didn't really come until No, Zionism is a state of mind where you think your shit don't stink. That's Zionism. Now, being a Hebrew, totally different thing. That's, the 12 tribes, and they are the poster boy of the other, right? In that there's 12 of them, and they all have, again, crosshairs of different cultures. Those 12 tribes were like 12 different religions, right? And they were all over the place until Moses and the Exodus because every time they would get their act together, they would diss all these other fledgling empires to the point that those people got sick of it and attacked Israel and took them into bondage, right? I think he's still in the hood. It looks like he's sitting in a seedy alley. No, I'm in the church wagon. I'm in the Jesus mobile. This ain't no seedy. Here, I'll give you a view. Let's see, where's that button? There it is. That's where I'm at. I'm out in the deep country. There are no cows. There are usually cows there, but they're not. See, there's where the cows kind of hang out, but they're not in there either. They're on the other North 40. So, yeah, I'm not in a seedy alleyway, but it could be, wherever I go, there I am, so. Oh, that's nice. Yes, it is. It's nice. Um, this is how Santa Claus looks after he leaves the hood. Yeah, pretty much. But again, I'm not Santa. I'm his brother Bob, So you gotta get the dutification right. Thank God, Bob. I do, every second of my life. Now, that's where we're supposed to be. When people say, oh, you need to pray. Well, people turn that into, oh, God, I'm praying so I win the lottery. Oh, God, I've got bad acne. Oh, God, no, that's not praying. Praying is you talk to God about God, how you doing? What do you need from me? What direction? I have no idea, God. I'm totally, I'm, a missing link here. I Wherever you want me to go, put me in that direction. I'm handing myself over to you, right? I'm a doula of God, meaning I am a slave. The Greek term doula means slave. In modern day, doula is the assistant of the midwife. And the doula does all the work. I mean, all the work. All the midwife does is kind of look at, he takes the pulse, when baby sounds good, blah, blah. And then when the kid comes, the midwife is right there, but the doula is up there patting the sweat off the girl and massaging the back and coaching, where, the midwife is just there to catch the kid, right? And the doula helps the midwife with everything, even that, right? So the bottom line is the doula is responsible. That's the real, the insurance policy is in the midwife's name. So, but the doula is the slave to giving love's birth. That's what it's about, right? So and you need to talk to God. So why did my car blow up? Why did all my digital everything go nuts and doesn't work? And why is this phone just, basically passive aggressive and only works when it wants to? It's only doing this because it wants it to, right? It's like, really? That's real? Really? So that is like Luke understanding what Jesus was in not just a, biased kind of way, And that was what the Pharisees who put Jesus to death, because he basically healed people. And the only way that could happen is that Jesus forgave those people of their sins. And the Pharisees say, oh boy, that's a big no-no. That means you're God, and you're saying you're God. And Jesus said, no, you're saying that, not me. I'm just doing, my Father's will, right? And that is that faith that God's unconditional love, had for Jesus. And from, before Jesus showed up, Jesus was there when the chuckleheads, when you read Genesis, and in the beginning, everything was dark, meaning there was stuff there. It was just they hadn't turned the light bulb on, right? And that's another reason why the Hebrews, have their Seder starting at Friday night. Once it gets dark, they basically celebrate the moon, where Christians celebrate the Son of God, the light, right? And Hebrews, will go after the moon. Now, both are made by God, and if you look at the yin-yang sign, the Asian point of view, you have the circle of life, right? And then you have this S, which is the path of life. Follow your brick road, follow, right? One side is all white, black dot. One side is all black, white dot. Light is the illumination, right? And a lot of biblical scholars say illumination, that's Satan, that's Lucifer, the illuminated one, right? Darkness is when Jesus he was in the dark. He was there and in the, and in the dark. And then there was the Word, not so much the light, the Word, right? And that was Jesus, right? So Jesus has been around because he's God, right? And God made everything. And God saw everything in the Alpha to the Omega of this chunk, right? Because God, in a lot of ways, is a work in progress, because he's a reflection of what we do. If we're really bad, and that's why I read the Torah. Once Hebrews got into cross the Jordan, they did everything wrong, and God was, bitching about them like they were a bad girlfriend stealing his cigarettes and his loose change, and so, the translation of the word Torah from Hebrew to Greek to English means, the Torah means, translated in Greek to Hebrew to English, it means you suck. And if you read the Old Testament, pretty much that's all that's going on, is how much we suck, how much we fail, how, every hero we have stumbles and falls. Moses, David, Abraham, you name it, they all screw up because they're human, right? Now, the one big scene is when you totally diss God. I don't believe blah, 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 right? And just, go, just shovel it on, right? But look at the guy who was on the cross with Jesus. There was the really creepy criminal, and then the not so creepy criminal who basically is up there with Jesus, and he's going to die too. And he goes, listen, I'm starting to see the ways, the foibles of where I was, and please, can you forgive me? And Jesus, sure, not a problem. So, let's see. Oh, that's nice. What else? You're in Virginia. Yep. Ba-doop, ba-doop, boop, boop. No, I'm in a state of Vermont, a Virginia state of mind. Been catching up on cable Kirk details. He was a legend, very local. No wonder they took him out. And again, the real deal of anything that occurs within the scope of his story is only understood with a passage of time, so it can be rewritten. And there is a script. There's a couple of scripts. There's God's script that is kind of unknowable, and then there is the script of the people who are the Pharisees. They're the lawyers of the Word of God, and the priests, the rabbis, the people who think they're in charge of the liturgy. We aren't we had Bible study, and I went to it, and I went with the idea of talking about the other. And so they told me to shut up because that wasn't the lesson. But as they went along, they were talking about Luke, and that's all Luke was talking about. I mean, I read Luke. I said, hey, look, he's talking about the other that, and that was Jesus. Jesus was the other. That's why they, put him on the cross, because they didn't want to hear what he had to say, right? They didn't want to lose their authority. That's why, Saul, who was, a Roman rich guy who was a Pharisee, and he was playing every side witch to grift. He's kind of like the Donald, but not really, because he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he went from killing Christians in the worst of ways to whoa, this is better than selling used cars, and he did, right? And he went and he went and he went, and he could just, when the Romans came and got him because he was being too annoying, because he's talking truth, and he wasn't. He was just publicizing what Matthew, Mark, and Luke said, right? And he took what those smart guys said and those sensitive people said, and the person who had the perspective, vision of the politique, and he took it and he rewrote their shit in Paul's writings, right? And he changed his name. He's no longer Saul, Better call Saul. And, went from a lawyer to a used car salesman, So that's the interestingness of it. So that's the lesson of today. Charles was a legend. And the way his wife, I've seen so much death. I've been friends to families that lose people. I mean, I could tell you stories that would just start you crying. And the bottom line is, if you're not scared of death, you can live. If you are scared of death, then you're dead already, right? And it said, in the beginning, the world was waste. Yes, exactly. And desolation, right? But that's still waste, and desolation means it's something, right? And the other thing is Elohim, right? What that is. So El is Hebrew for God. Elohim is plural. So when it says that Elohim said that we're going to make man in the image and likeness of us, and it says us, plural, not God, not the unknowable one, right? Yep, the legend better than any you lot. Yep, exactly. That's certainty. Hey, a legend is always much better. I mean, that's why I'm alive. I'm just the myth. You're not the legend. Wow. Oh, put your glasses on only. Well, I mean, I don't have them with me, and I mean, I do have these glasses, my Stevie Wonder glasses. I do have those. Because my eyes, if you can't tell, are super blue, so they're really sensitive to light. But putting them in the caps, kids, is really good for me. Thank you very much. Let's see. Do 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 do. So yeah, it's much better not to be a legend, right? Because basically you're being used. If you're a legend, you're being used. I mean, Jesus is not a legend. He's not. He's Jesus. He's not a legend, right? It's not a make believe thing because legends are make believe, right? So, but like I said, I was a good friend with Jerry Falwell. Go back and see the stories of how Jerry Falwell and I met. And the same with you know, Billy Graham. I lived in Asheville for 9 years, and about 7 of those years, I was the itinerant scholar. And I basically would get hired by entities like Brookings and things of that nature to go not administer, but be the guy who had the perspective on what they were doing, whether they were just wasting their time or if they were just, running a study through biased. That's what I was there to. I was the odd man out, the devil's advocate, if you want to say that. And so I would get on that jet. That wasn't jet; it was a prop jet. It was a puddle jumper that went from Asheville to, Charlotte, right? And that's where all the planes came in and out of. And so I took the 11 a.m. I mean, they had 3 flights. They had a flight that came in at 6:30 and left at 7 a.m. They had another one that came in at 10:30 and left at 11, and they had another one that came in at 5:30 and left at 6. So the 11 was mine. I'm not a morning guy. And so I would go down there, and when I first took that airplane, they didn't even have a airline station. They had the tarmac, they had where you could park a car, and it wasn't even had a fence around it. And no one took money. You just kind of parked your car there. And it was like going to the Long Island Railroad. And they had a little covering, so if it was raining or that, and they had a little shack, and the airplane would land, people would get off and go into their cars, drive away. One of the stewardesses would come out, open up the shack, take out a rolly thing that had the ticket thing, and people would come and either buy a ticket or have a ticket, and she would, authorize it to get on the airplane, and then they take off, and that was it. So I would, leave at 11 a.m., and the ticket came with, I would get an envelope from whoever hired me, and there would be another envelope in that envelope that had my ticket and 5 or 6 Benjamins for spending money, right? And then I would put in, they had a whole thing of your expenses, and they would, give you, pay those expenses, and that, I forget what it was called, but that 5 Benjamins was a fee to get you rolling. I mean, you didn't have to sign that, get receipts on that 500, but the rest, your motel room, the this, that, the other thing. And sometimes they would book you into a place that they had a relationship with. So it was a nice gig. I got paid well. I met lots of people, and one of the people I met by doing that was Billy Graham, because one time I get on the 11 a.m. flight, and he's already up there, right? And I get there. The plane came in. 3 people got off. Billy was in his car. He got out of his car. He walked over. He knew that, he'd been getting on this airplane at least 3 times a month. And, so He's already on the airplane. He's sitting up front where the big leg room is, right? And I get on, and it's got like 50 seats. It's one of those Brazilian or French aircraft. And I get on, and Billy goes, why don't you sit here with me? I got long legs, it's you can stretch out. And so I did, and we started talking, and he was in really nice pair of jeans, a really nice cowboy shirt, a kind of jacket, and he had a little briefcase with him, and that was it, right? And he had a hat, right? He had cowboy hats, and he had baseball hats, kind of like my look. And was my look, right? Right, that was my look, right? And so we got talking about everything, right? And mostly theology. And so, yep, legend better than any. Yep, yep, yep. Let's see, who said that? James said it. Okay. Created and world is awakening to that fact. Yep, yep. So Charlie, Captain Kirk, like I said, was a very nice young man, very on top of it, very sharp, very clear, very everything, right? Had a lot of ambition. That was his. Anyone asked me what was the one word that would connote and denote and exemplify what I observed of Captain Kirk, C. Kirk, was his wanted to be, have a movement, to really move. And when I first met him, he wasn't really all that Christian. He was more about, Republican conservatism, balancing the budget, all of that, right? But the new movement of, the silent majority was being manifested by Jerry Falwell. I mean, he had money behind him, big money. That's how he could spend close to $1 billion on building LU within, 7 years. It went from nothing happening in Lynchburg to LU, right? And I met Jerry when nothing was happening. I worked for an electric company, and I was actually working for the BBI, Bureau of Behavioral Investigation, because there is this thing that goes from Asheville straight up 26 to Johnson City, takes a right turn on 81 and goes up to Swannanoa or Shannon, some little town up there with 66, where Woodrow Wilson came from. And basically, it was littered with satanic ritual murders. And all the police would say, oh, it was a drug deal gone wrong. And all you needed was a ladder. If you could get a ladder about 10 feet off the ground, take a picture down, you could see the body parts were aligned in a satanic sitchin, right? A magic spell, per se. And nobody wanted to talk about that. And those guys, that was their whole thing. The BBI's whole thing was the things that went bump in the night. And they basically were funded by the Vatican and, a consortium of high hippie Jewish rabbi holies and other entities of that nature that were, occult and esoteric in nature, right? And so like our King James has the Old Testament, which is, the Torah, right? But there were 3 books, Torah, Tabla, and Kabbalah. And Tabla was, the esoteric, meaning that's where the Pharisees got their authority of their law. But they made it up from nothing. I mean, they just took stuff from that esoteric nature and made up the laws. Meaning, when God gave us the 10 Commandments, that's all He gave us. Didn't. But by the time Jesus showed up, there was something like 100,000 laws in the Tabla that could get you killed. or at least thrown out of the tribe, right? And these guys could, it was like protection racket money, right? And the cabal, that was a whole nother story because you could do shit like you could make. Why the Jews were almost invincible wasn't because God was on their side. No, they had the cabal, which they could make these things called, oh, they were like robots made out of mud, golems, right? And so, when that scene where David is, right? And the Persians come in and said, okay, we got this big giant, bigger than any of your golems. And he's got, he will kick that piece of mud and stomp on it. And that's why they sent David, who was like a little guy in his shorts and his flip-flops. And God said, go on, Dave. You're really good with that sling. You can do it. You only need one stone, right? So David comes down. His brothers are all in armor and everything because they come kind of from a rich family. And at least it has a lineage. And David says to the king, hey, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. And the guy looks, you're a kid. You're small. You have no armor. You can at least put some armor on him. And he goes, no. God's got my back. And the king goes, yeah, that's what we all say. But it doesn't look that way. That golem thing didn't work out too good. And we're in a pickle here. So the king goes, sure, kid, you want to die? Go ahead. So David goes out there, and he's walking up to the giant and goes, hey, how you doing? And the giant goes, you? What you? And, oh, I'm going to kill you. You, ha, 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 ha. David leans down and picks up 3 stones, not one. God said to pick up 1 stone. He picked up 3. So he dissed God. He didn't believe God. God would have said, hey, take care of this. I got your back. Now, God could have said, well, that mother, see how he likes, the big guy steps on David. That was it. But no, the first stone, zing, bang, he's over. But David didn't believe, didn't have the faith. And that's why David basically then becomes the hero, then becomes the legend, then becomes the king. Then he totally trashes other people that he shouldn't and takes advantage of them. And then he gets into a war that he's a little bit, it's like what's going on with the IDF and Hamas. They can't seem to kill those guys, Who knew, right? And so David does the same thing, but he does it even better in that he sleeps with his top general's wife. And, not good. And so that's why the house of David was cursed. And God knew it from the beginning. He gave him a shot. You only need 1 stone. If David had reciprocated God's faith in him of taking care of the problem, it would have been a different story. I mean, we'd be in a different world today, but we're not. So, and, what's going on in Israel is still that, if you go into the biblical, it's still that curse of David. So anyway, and don't believe a word I say. This is just me telling you a story. Yep. Legend better. Let's see what else you guys are saying here. Wait, bro. Yo. Hey there, Fish. Good to see you, girl. Brand. Let's see. Get that fuzzy face. What fuzzy face you talking about? What fuzzy face you talking about? What are you talking about? The evil eye is on you, buddy. Ooh, watch out for the evil eye. Anyway. So, it's good to hear from you, sweetie. And what else is there? Okay. So, what else, fellas? So I've thrown out a lot of stuff here. So what do you think? What's your military show, Kremlin in crisis, Putin's CNN? Yeah, I mean, again, all of this stuff with Putin, the war of the 2 Vlads, it's scripted. Donald becoming president 16, and then blind man's buff. Chatty Cathy Joe becomes, and then, he gets thrown under the bus. And the girl who can't win, I mean, Donald can only win an election against women that he can diss, and and all they can say, well, he's a bad man, he's a fascist. And I hate it when people say that because they don't know what fascism is. No, Donald is a grifter, right? He's making money hand over fist, and he's reading the script. Everything he's doing, you'd have to be more than a moron, more than stupid, than to do the stuff he's doing, right? He's destroying our economy. He's destroying whatever safety net we have. He's throwing everyone under the bus, and all the people who are mega are still loving him. Everybody around here thinks he's like the best thing since, that he's going to send us a check. Well, good luck with that. No. And that's why my car is dead and my electronic devices are dead, and this thing is only working because of a miracle. Miracle, right? But you won't, that's why yesterday the magic didn't happen, right? So, what are all those symbols? I can't even, do I have glasses even? I think I do. Yep, I got my magic pockets that have a little bit of everything. Oh, there we go. There's the Israeli flag and whatever that face is, whatever that means. And it says, I hit you. Okay, whatever. Ashan all 100. But again, remember, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensie Owl Bob, me, this guy here. I've been on the air now for 36 minutes and 52 seconds, and it's been fun, and you guys have actually been pretty responsive. I'm quite impressed. Get the fuzzy face fixed. There's no fixing this face, I'm sorry. I go with what God gave me. Mantras. Where are you from? Where am I from? I am from 197th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. That's where I'm from, right? I'm from, above Harlem, right where the Harlem River is. And on the east side is everyone white and European, and on the middle it's everyone African. That's me. I'm an African American that's melanin challenged, right? And to the west was everyone Caribbean. And I was anyone who had, a tan, people from, Jamaica, people from India, people from China. They're all Caribbean. At least that's what the white folk in power said. Anyway, so that's where I'm from. So I had this amazing experience as a youth, like from 0 to 10 or 0 to 7. I wasn't in a melting pot. I was in a salad bowl. All of these different cultures were distinct, like PS 122. I mean, I didn't go to school there, but it was the central community center. And my grandma, I was always with my grandma, right? Or with Mrs. Green, who is the black woman who fed me. And that's why I'm African American. I spent 2.5 years on her tit with her young daughter, who was about 4 months older than I was, named Emily. So she and we were twins, where she was the older twin by 4 months. And we were inseparable. Then, I went back to my Farrell family in Long Island, and that was fun. And again, no one knew I existed, so when I came back there and I was still a peanut, a little guy, no one noticed me. I was the other. So I'm pretty familiar with that experience, being the other. And it was great. I was invisible. I just sat back and took notes, right? And every now and then my father would jig when I zagged, and he would trip over me. And he looked at, who are you? What are you doing here? You're not one of us. Now, if I was your normal 7-year-old, that would have scarred me for all my whole life. But I had already been observing my family for about 6 months and realized that these guys were nuts, and I couldn't believe that my father, my sperm donor, came from my grandma, who was unconditional love, and she never went to a lick of school in her life. and she could speak 4 languages because everyone spoke different language, and she had this ear for doing that. Plus, around 1950, she started getting the Reader's Digest delivered to her house every month or every week, but she had a zillion Reader's Digests. So that's kind of where I learned to read and learn about the world. Not the encyclopedia, but the Reader's Digest. It's more narrative and more up to date of what was going on, and it wasn't orchestrated by committee. So anyway, that's kind of my thumbnail thing of where and who and what I was. And my parents were, I mean, I was very blessed. My parents should have never had kids, but they had a bunch of us, and I was the last one, so they forgot I existed. Except my parents had a really ornery side and a really good side, a fun side, an exciting side. My dad was big into over the horizon, having vacations, and so my dad was, in the Air Force. He worked for General Curtis LeMay and, what's his name, McNamara during World War II, and they incinerated Europe, and then they went on to, with the B-29, incinerate Japan. And it was designed from the beginning. They knew about the atomic bomb, so that was it. But it flew at about 40,000 feet in a pressurized cabin instead of having to wear all these, snowsuits and oxygen masks to fly a plane and arm a 50 caliber like a B-17. They were in their short sleeves. Now they got a bullet hole and it freezes to death like almost immediately. So it had its downside, but it was a very way ahead of its time. And my dad was, they designed it, they built it, they were testing it, and they were having trouble. So my dad was brought back to become the administrator of getting it done. And that was my dad's greatest skill, at least in the business material world, getting it done, right? And I got that, I'm Mr. Fix-It, right? And so, but I, fix more or less, not people, but situations. Now, I'm great as an electrician. Anything electric, I can fix, right? Anything electrical, mechanical, I can fix. Cars, forget about it, because everything's backwards. And, integrated circuits, no way, Jose, right? And so, we have is that a Muslim brother? Asha Allah, 100%. Okay. So, salam alaikum, my brother. And that's what we need. We need respect for all the others. He's definitely another, and we're another. So boring. Let's see. Instagram id, please. Well, that's not my forte. I'm sorry, buddy. So anyway, my dad, my mom said to my dad, okay, you got to leave the Air Force. I mean, it was fun. He was colonel. He got the nice house. He got servants, the chauffeur, all that kind of good stuff, but not making any big money. And he was never going to be a general because he never flew an airplane. And in the Air Force, you had to fly airplanes to be a general. And in a lot of ways, he was too honest to make that. He was doing it. Anyway, so once you get to that space and experience, there is, you are in uniform or out of uniform, but you're still in service, right? So my dad kind of, got his 18 years or whatever. So he at leaving, he could get the best, check and gifts. But he had already been to college. He had already done a bunch of stuff. But what he did was when he came out, he went back to Long Island, and he decided that all these guys were looking for a job. So he decided. My mother had it all visioned what she wanted. She wanted to. My father's father had barbershops, really fancy ones to the rich and powerful. And then in the 20s, when the girls wanted the short haircuts like guys, he started salons. And so during the war, my mom and my oldest sister hung with my grandpa and grandma. And so she got this whole idea of, okay, we're going to start a business manufacturing the stuff that he used. And we're going to think, she had a whole, because she worked in the hospital, she goes, we're going to branch out into the medical, right? So she had this whole bit, and that's my mom. She's like Marilyn Monroe mixed with Albert Einstein, and more Marilyn Monroe. What's her name? The discoverer, Curie, and Adolf Hitler. That's my mom. So anyway, she's got the vision. So my mom's the admiral of the Navy. My dad is the captain of the ship. Hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless. Thanks, Top Shelf. You are the top shelf. I love you, boy. So, how about some more thumbs up? How about some more people? How about some guys? Some people have asked, can I copy your shows? So, yes, I have like over 2,500 shows. I've been doing this now almost 8 years, right? And I pretty much go and look, go to the beginning and start working up, right? And you don't have to watch the whole thing. Look at the first, 60 seconds. If it enamors you, if it amuses you, do you find me funny? It'll work. Look for another 60 seconds. And then if you still, then you kind of just, take that little cursor on the red line and go whoop and go ahead like 20, 40 minutes and see what I was talking about there. And if that engrosses you, don't spend any more than 5 minutes. But the ones you like, you can copy, put it on thumb drive, put it on your hard drive. Spread me around like cream cheese, because all I am is a pebble in the puddle of the World Wide Web. Right? That's me. And so, and I appreciate that blessing. Blessings I appreciate. India Gold Token. Yeah, well, whatever is what I say, because we're all humans on this bus, right? We all, like I said, we're all in the crosshair of whatever culture we were brought up in. And those of us who can not be biased by that dipping have a potential to get a worldview that you can navigate and serve love's co-creation. And that's where it's at. That's what we're here. This life, this material life we have, this ain't the beginning and end of it all. And all this is a sandbox where we can practice and experiment. And that's why, I've seen so much death and so much harm and so much, I could blaspheme God, but I don't, because it's not God doing this. It's us. We can learn from our mistakes, but we don't seem to. We can, right? There are a lot of people who do and do their best to be their best, and that was basically Billy Graham, definitely. And same with Jerry Falwell. And yet, they both followed, they both told me that they felt, misabused, And, Billy would say, I am a very wealthy man. I have a very blessed life. I can help many people, and I do my best to do that. And I try to speak truth to power, but I don't decide. I'm not the decider. And that's really the thing that we're here to do, to learn how to be the decider. He just would put on that $1,000 suit and get up there and do what he was really good at, preaching, right? And Jerry, not so much, right? He could get up there and do it, but he would burst out laughing, And so, but what Jerry was really best at, he was a strategist. And that's one of my skill sets, right? And that's one thing that he really liked about me, that I looked at things not as a bias, but as a, I wonder what's this, and how does that work, and how does this part fit in? And we would have these great conversations, and so I knew him for a good, 8 years, really 3. But, and I moved from Lynchburg to Roanoke, right? And so that was, and then I spent 10 years, bebopping all around and mostly staying in Florida. I would come back to Roanoke for spring, and then I would go to the deep green for the late spring when everything was already green, and enjoy that first beginning part of the summer when no one was here, and go swimming and kayaking and all that fun stuff where I was still kind of young enough. I hiked all through the mountains of Tennessee here in this neck of the woods. And then, about 8 years ago, the developers came in and just blew this. First, they blew Asheville apart. When I was in Asheville between 91 and 99, and I actually left in 98. That's when I got the gig with the BBI, and I kind of was scoping out the Devil's Highway and watching. And what was truly interesting was that whole space between, what's it called? Starts with a B. Bedford. From Bedford to almost Roanoke, there was this road called 47 that was just on the edge of where the lower end of the Blue Ridge Mountains were, right? And just kind of went there. And roads just kind of zipped up into the mountains, right? And they would jump on to the Blue Ridge Parkway, right? Which kind of goes from Georgia to Maine. And that right there is probably one of the most beautiful parts of the Blue Ridge Parkway, that stretch there. And the other beautiful stretch is over near Asheville and Waynesville, and then into Tennessee. It really, up to about here, right? And, well, not here, but Lenore, which is not here. It's about 70 miles from here. But anyway, so I've been very blessed to be all over the place early on in my life. So I died, when I was born. And I was cognizant of being choked to death by my mother's umbilical cord, right? And Dr. Black saved my life. She kicked two chucklehead surgeons that were like, my mom said, no cesarean for me. Just pull him out with the salad tongues. I don't care if he's a blue baby or dead, One less kid, the better. And that was my mom's attitude when she was drunk and high. Like I said, my parents, they never beat us. They never really, but, and there was, I would say, a third of the time when they were loving, caring, really groovy parents. My mom and I was very blessed because when I survived and I was there, my mom actually took a liking to me. The way I didn't cry, I didn't whine, I didn't ask for anything. My whole thing was, I always brought a flower for my mother. My mom loved cut flowers because she worked in a hospital and she'd take all the dead people's cut flowers and put them all around her apartment. So anyway, both my parents were complicated, interesting, fun, and dangerous people. But they weren't that dangerous, like they weren't going to kill us or anything, but they could suck the life out of you. So, I saw my father do it, both my parents do it to all my brothers and sisters. I was the only one because that formative little Easter egg time between birth and 7 years old, I was with people who loved me, right? And, I could walk the streets of Harlem. And in those days, nothing, grandmas were on the stoop, and the grandmas had a secret language. So you do something on one side of town where you thought no one's watching you. That grandma sees you and tells your grandma you get home. Those grandmas never whipped us. We weren't, but they would like, I'm very disappointed, so. Message is held for review. Well, I'm sorry about that. So anyway, how much juice do we? Oh, we still got a bunch of juice left. And so, come on, a little more thumbs up. Get some more people. And let's hear some of your stories about your childhood. Mr. Message is held for review. Why don't you give us a message about your childhood? Or any of you three there, right? Or ask questions. I'm here to answer. About, anything, right? Like, why do we have a First Amendment? Why do we have amendments at all? Because we had a, constitution, We had a Declaration of Independence, so why'd we need, you know, amendments? Why? Because basically, the English and French came over and took, the Spanish first showed up. They didn't like the cold, so they stuck down in Florida and Texas and Mexico and Central America and South America. And there was lots of stuff there. They were busy, right? They didn't have to go north. And so the French went way north into Quebec and Canada, but the English were there too, but just a T hold. And they had these things called the French and Indian Wars, right? And the Indians were kind of, if you see the movie Last of the Mohicans, you can see how it worked out. And so the Indians, before white people showed up, never had wars. They had like games. And yeah, they were dangerous. So you played it. You could, like lacrosse. And the field wasn't like a football field or a soccer field. It was like 20 miles long from one town to the other, right? From one reservation to the other. And in that game, all the non-combatants would get out of the way and go up on the hills and cheer for their team. And if you had the ball, the opposite guys could kill you. I mean, that was, so it's very controlled warfare. So the warriors who had a warrior spirit and wanted to have war, they could have these games that wouldn't kill grandma and the kids, right? Wouldn't shoot 6-year-olds in the groin and in the head. They basically took their psychosis out on each other, which was great because it lowered the number of those psychos, right? So, and it gave them a very honored position, and they could be the legend, right? So that's kind of what happened, and the Europeans just took that and took it off the hook, right? So by the time the 18th century happened, and we had 1776. England was tired. They were spending too much money on America, and they basically wanted to get out, but they couldn't just quit. They couldn't do a whatchamacallit, a Biden. They couldn't do a Biden. Just pull out. Meaning, we did that on purpose. That whole chaos thing, because we had this base that was the biggest base that America ever had, right? And it had a mountain at its back. You couldn't attack that base. And we left all helicopters and tanks and planes and warehouses full of mortars and guns, and we just walked away, turned out the lights, and left it all there. And then said, hey, we're leaving, and we took commercial airliners out of and then Taliban just kind of swept through the whole place. We wanted the guys who were there when we started bombing them in 2000 ended up there when we left. They were working for us, just like Hamas works for the IDF. Hamas didn't exist until the IDF and Mossad invented them. They put those people in power. They didn't like Ansar, the Palestine Liberation Front. They didn't like those guys, so they put Hamas there, and Hamas got $1 million a week for years from the American taxpayers to do exactly what they did, right? So. And the IDF destroyed it, right? So it was, one of those interesting little interludes, and it's happened before. The Romans did it, the Greeks did it, Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Babylonians, they all kind of did the same thing. To the other. And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the other. It's those people who are in the crosshairs. They've done nothing wrong. They're not the ones with the guns. They are the, non-combatants. The 68 million or 68,000 people who is alleged to be dead in this strip. They did not have a gun in their hand. Those kids who were going to get water and got a bullet in the head and one in the groin did not have a gun in their hand. They're starving, and they still are. And basically, you can't blame Judaism for this. You can't blame the Hebrew tribes for this. What is going on is a business deal, right? And that's what it is. So, anyway, I'm going to say goodnight, Gracie. I might come back.